What happened with African Americans? With us, we were literally dragged out of our traditional culture in West Africa and locked onto slave labor camps that were referred to in a very genteel fashion as plantations. They were slave labor camps. And these people were imprisoned on these slave labor camps where it literally worked to death.
80% of Americans don't understand what it meant to be a slave. They think, because of the way it's taught, that it just means that someone had ownership over you. It was degradation. It was emasculation. It was humiliation. They would despiritualize you. The same person had to feed you. Now let's think. What was the food?
They were fed the garbage of those camps. So they were fed the entrails, the feet, the ears of the animals.
Pig ears, pig skin, pig feet. The only reason you even eat that is because that was what was thrown out by master.
They would say the master ate high from the hog. That's why we ate pig's feet and pig's intestines, which were riddled with bacteria and disease and feces and all types of stuff. You know, this is what they gave us. This is where the concept of scrapple and all these things come from.
So the plantation diet would consist of some chitlins and some type of pork and maybe some cornbread and stuff that you may consider soul food now.
You had to use what was left, and that was passed on. And we even started naming our food like soul food, you know.
Then it became just a way of loving and showing love to our family, because there wasn't a lot of happiness in different ways, but we could show happiness through food. And so it became more comfort food.
The psychological effects of colonization, you know, are layers and layers deep.
Dr. Joy DeGroot talks about just the post-traumatic slave syndrome. And a lot of things that have been passed down as culture really was trauma and survival tactics.
So now, as opposed to you or your great-great-grandfather, grandmother getting the scraps and making the best as they can with things, you make it a delicacy.
Tradition has become very unhealthy and deadly for the Black community because of what, number one, we have access to, but what has become a tradition from slavery and the things that we pour into our body is awful and detrimental.
Tradition is a powerful and sometimes tragic thing, you know? When you go to Alabama and you see a good old boy and he's got his Southern flag up, that's his tradition. That's his family, that's in his blood. But his tradition is dangerous. His tradition is divisive. His tradition is bad for him and the people that's around him. His tradition is unhealthy. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Like, these traditions that we hold on to are unhealthy. Why would you love something that hates you? You fighting against your own interests.
So Black people are trying to preserve some of their culture by eating soul food. But what they don't realize, soul food is from slavery. That's the only culture we got, slavery.
This is not the way West Africans traditionally ate. This is what we were force-fed when we were enslaved.
What was great in the past that came from this tradition? What was so wonderful? You know, and identify what those things are and keep those things and identify those things as a tradition. So if you're thinking, oh, it's family dinner on Sunday, right? Well, what you really loved was being with your family on Sunday and sharing a meal. It wasn't the pig's feet, you know? That's not what it is. That's not the fried chicken that's bringing the family together. The family is coming together and cooking. It's an act, the act of service between people, the camaraderie, the catching up, the talking. Those things don't need unhealthy habits to exist and be the tradition.
It's sad that this recipe that you grew up with is the reason that a lot of your older relatives are in the state that they're in. You eat how your mama eat. You got the same diseases your daddy had. We prayed over that nasty stuff. You know, God bless this slavery food that we won't stop eating.
We no longer have to do this. Sad fact is that as African Americans, we are carrying the last vestiges of slavery on our plates. It's not soul food, it's plantation food. This is not our traditional heritage. This is not the way West Africans traditionally ate. West Africans had agrarian-based communities where they grew their own crops, had diets that were built around whole foods, whole grains, vegetables, no dairy, very little animal food.
A lot of what we ate were plant-based. And if we ate other beings, it wasn't all the time, every day, all day long, extra, extra, extra. It was what we needed, and that was it.
A study conducted by the University of Pittsburgh showed that when Black Americans adopted a more traditional African diet, high in fiber, fruits, vegetables, low in fat, with little to no meat, after only 2 weeks, they started producing more anti-cancer molecules in their bodies, proven to protect against colon cancer in particular. In the same study, when Black Africans switched from their traditional foods to an American diet, their bodies produced microbiota that were cancerous. African Americans suffer more than double the rates of hypertension than people in West Africa. But as Western diets have begun to pervade the African continent, hypertension goes with it.